What if the most quiet moments with your baby are the ones that matter the most? Not the crying, not the obvious distress, but the moments when they call for you and nothing happens. Because here's what most parents don't realize. When a baby cries and no one responds, something very specific begins to happen inside their body. And it's not just emotional, it's biological. Their heart rate changes, their breathing shifts, their stress system activates. And if this pattern repeats often enough, their brain starts adapting to it. Not in a visible way, not in a way you can easily notice, but in a way that can shape how they experience the world for years to come. Now, let's be clear. This is not about blaming parents. This is not about fear. This is about understanding what's actually happening in those moments that seem small, but aren't. Because what science has discovered in the last 2 decades completely changes how we should think about a crying baby. And by the end of this video, you'll never hear your baby cry the same way again. Let's start with something simple. A baby cries. From the outside, it looks like noise, sometimes random, sometimes exaggerated. But inside the baby's body, it's not random at all. It's a full-body signal, a signal that says, something is wrong, and I can't fix it on my own. Because here's the part most people don't understand. A baby doesn't have the ability to calm themselves, not in the way adults do. The part of the brain responsible for regulation, the prefrontal cortex, is still developing. Which means when a baby becomes overwhelmed, they don't process it. They experience it, fully, immediately, and without control. So when they cry, they're not asking for attention. They're asking for regulation. They're asking for someone else's nervous system to help stabilize their own. And when that response comes quickly, something powerful happens. Their body begins to settle. Their stress hormones decrease, their heart rate slows down, and their brain starts building a very specific pattern. A pattern that says, when something feels wrong, someone comes. And that pattern becomes the foundation of something much bigger later in life. But when that response doesn't come, even for what feels like a short moment, a different process begins. And this is where things start to get interesting. What happens next is something most people never see. Because from the outside, it can look like nothing is happening. The baby is still there, maybe still crying, maybe even starting to quiet down. But inside their body, a completely different story is unfolding. When a baby cries and doesn't receive a response, their stress system activates almost immediately. And the main hormone involved in that response is cortisol. Cortisol is not a bad thing by itself. It's part of how the body reacts to stress. It helps mobilize energy. It prepares the body to deal with a threat. But in a developing brain, the way cortisol is experienced matters a lot. Because a baby's brain is still building its basic structure. Connections are forming rapidly. Systems are organizing in real time. And repeated stress without regulation doesn't just pass, it gets encoded. Now here's where it becomes important. When a baby cries and someone responds, that stress response is activated and then resolved. Cortisol rises, but then it falls. The system completes the cycle. And over time, the brain learns something very specific. Stress can end. Relief comes. The world is manageable. But when the response doesn't come, the cycle doesn't complete. Cortisol stays elevated longer. The nervous system stays activated. And instead of learning resolution, the brain starts adapting to ongoing stress. Now, this doesn't mean that one moment will change everything. That's not how this works. But patterns matter. Because the brain is constantly asking one question: what should I expect from the world? And it answers that question based on repetition, not intention, not love, not what you meant to do, but what actually happens. And over time, those repeated moments of unresponded distress begin to form a pattern that says, when I feel something intense, nothing changes. And here's where it gets even more interesting, because babies don't all respond the same way. Some babies cry louder, they signal more, they keep trying. But some babies do something very different. They go quiet. And from the outside, that can look like success. It can look like they've calmed down, like they've learned to self-soothe. But in many cases, that's not what's happening at all. What's actually happening is something researchers describe as a shutdown response. The baby stops signaling not because the stress is gone, but because the signal isn't working. Their body is still activated, cortisol is still elevated, but the outward expression disappears. And this is the part that confuses a lot of people, because a quiet baby is not always a calm baby. Sometimes it's a baby who has adapted, a baby who has learned at a very early level, expressing this doesn't change anything. And that learning doesn't stay in infancy. It becomes part of how the nervous system operates, how stress is handled, how connection is experienced. Now again, this is not about perfection. You are not going to respond every single time. That's not realistic. But understanding what's happening in these moments changes how you see them. Because what looks like a small delay or an insignificant moment is actually part of a much larger process. A process where your baby's brain is learning how the world responds to them. And that learning is happening right now, even in the quiet moments. Now let's take this one step further, because this isn't just about stress hormones or short-term reactions. It's about something deeper. It's about how your baby learns what connection feels like. Because every time your baby reaches out, through a cry, a sound, a movement, they're not just reacting. They're trying to connect. They're trying to understand if someone is there, if someone is listening, if someone responds. And when that connection happens consistently, something powerful begins to form. A sense of safety, not just physical safety, but emotional safety. The kind of safety that tells the nervous system, I don't have to handle everything alone. And that becomes the foundation for how your baby will experience relationships later in life. But when those moments of reaching out are met with silence, or delay, or inconsistency, a different pattern begins to take shape. Not immediately, not in a way you can clearly see, but slowly, quietly. Your baby starts adjusting. Instead of expecting connection, they begin to adapt to its absence. And this is where something subtle happens. They stop expecting someone to come. They stop anticipating that response. And over time, their system becomes more self-protective, more guarded, because from their perspective, the world becomes less predictable. Now, this doesn't mean they stop needing connection. That need never goes away. What changes is how they express it. Some babies become more intense. They cry louder. They seek more, because their system is trying harder to get a response. But others do the opposite. They become quieter, less expressive, less reactive. And again, from the outside, this can look like a good baby, a calm baby, an easy baby. But internally, their system may be doing something very different. They may be adapting by reducing their signals, not because they don't feel, but because expressing it doesn't seem to change anything. And this is where many parents get confused, because the absence of crying can feel like everything is fine. But silence is not always a sign of comfort. Sometimes it's a sign of adaptation. Now here's something even more important. This process doesn't only happen when your baby is crying. It also happens in the small moments throughout the day. Moments that don't seem important. Your baby looks at you, makes a sound, reaches out in their own way. And in that moment, they're doing something very specific. They're initiating connection. And when that connection is met, when you look back, respond, engage, their brain strengthens that pathway. But when those moments are missed, when attention is somewhere else, when there's no response, those opportunities slowly disappear. And over time, your baby begins to expect less. Not consciously, but neurologically. Because their brain is constantly adapting to what is repeated. And what gets repeated becomes their reality. Now this might sound intense, but there's something very important to understand. This is not about getting it right all the time. It's about patterns. Because even small moments of connection, when they happen consistently, have a powerful effect. Your presence, your response, your attention. These are not small things to your baby. They are the environment their brain is developing in. And that environment is shaping them every single day.
Now, after hearing all of this, it's easy to start questioning yourself. To think back to moments where you didn't respond right away. To wonder if you've already done something wrong. But this is the part that matters most. You don't have to be perfect. Your baby doesn't need perfection. They don't need you to respond instantly every single time, because that's not real life. And it's not what shapes them. What shapes your baby is something much simpler. Consistency, connection, and most importantly, return. Because the moments where you miss it, the moments where you're tired, distracted, overwhelmed, those moments are not what define the relationship. What defines it is what happens after. Do you come back? Do you reconnect? Do you respond when you can? Because every time you return, every time your baby feels that shift back into connection, their brain registers something powerful. I'm not alone. And that matters more than getting everything right. Now think about this. Every time your baby cries, they're not just making noise. They're reaching out. They're asking a question without words. A question that sounds like this. Is someone there for me? And over time, the way that question gets answered becomes part of who they are. Not consciously, but deeply. It shapes how they handle stress, how they experience connection, how safe the world feels to them. And here's the part most people don't realize. You don't need to change everything. You don't need to become a perfect parent overnight. Because even small shifts make a real difference. Being a little more present, responding a little sooner, noticing those small moments where your baby is trying to connect, those things add up. They change the pattern. And when the pattern changes, everything changes with it. So the next time your baby cries, or looks at you, or reaches out in their own way, you'll see it differently. Not as something to fix quickly, but as something to respond to. Something that matters. Because in those moments, your baby is not just expressing a need. They're building a relationship. And that relationship is shaping their world. If this made you see things differently, subscribe. Because what your baby feels is only the beginning.